One of my relatives passed away suddenly. I never met the woman. She had a daughter who was 4 years old. The little girl's name was Yuki. Her father wasn't able to raise her on his own, so he asked my aunt to take care of her. The little girl refused to be left home alone and never left my aunt's side. It started to become a problem. My aunt couldn't go anywhere without Yuki, so constantly needed attention. Even my aunt's own daughter started to get jealous. One day my aunt told me she had to go out of town for a couple of days and asked if I could babysit the little girl for her. I said it would be my pleasure. I lived alone and I could do with some company. A few days later my aunt dropped Yuki off at my apartment. As she was leaving, she took the little girl aside and said, "Yuki, please be good and behave yourself." When my aunt was gone, I tried to talk to Yuki and play some games with her, but the little girl's behavior was very strange. She had a teddy bear tracked tightly under her arm and never let it go of it. She never smiled and never spoke. She all did was sit quietly in the corner and stare at the wall. It made me kind of uneasy. I was trying to find something that would entertain her. I had just bought a new digital camera and I decided to let Yuki play with my old one. When she saw the camera, her eyes lit up. I showed her how to use it and she went around my apartment taking pictures of everything. There was a bright smile on her face. That evening I discovered how difficult it was to deal with. Whenever I tried to leave the room, she started crying and screaming out my name. I couldn't leave her alone or she would create a huge fuss. She even insists on going to the bathroom with me, which was very embarrassing. At bedtime, she refused to stay in the spare room and I insisted on sleeping in my bed. I read her a bedtime story. After a while, I managed to get her to go to sleep. That was when I noticed her teddy bear. One of its legs was short and back in it, as if it had been burned. It made me wonder. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by a strange noise. When I turned over, I saw that there was something wrong with Yuki. The little girl's body was trembling and shaking. Her eyes were wide open, her teeth were chattering, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I held her close and asked her what was wrong. "She is looking at me again," she mumbled. "Who is?" "The dark woman," replied Yuki. She wouldn't say anything more. I tried to tell her it was just her imagination, but she kept shaking her head and whimpering. It took me a long time to get her to go back to sleep. The next day, Yuki was fine again. She loved playing with my digital camera. When it was time for her to go home, I told her she could keep it. Yuki hugged me, although she didn't say anything. I could tell she was overjoyed. I dropped the little girl off my aunt's house and stayed to have a cup of tea. My aunt thanked me for taking care of Yuki. We spent a while chatting at the kitchen table. "Poor little thing," said my aunt. She hasn't said a word since her mother died. I couldn't contain my curiosity. "How did Yuki's mom die?" I asked. A strange look came over my aunt's face. "She died in a fire." "How did the fire start?" I asked. "Well," my aunt hesitated, unwilling to talk about it. "It's a very sad story. She committed suicide. Yuki's mother was a very troubled woman. She poured gasoline on herself and lit a match. She burned herself alive." "Oh my God," I exclaimed in a horrible way. "Yes," said my aunt. Her family was so shocked. They hushed up and pretended it was an accident. We had a small funeral, but only close relatives were invited. Yuki wasn't there. She doesn't even know her mother is dead. She thinks her mother is just on a long holiday. We haven't had to her to tell her the truth." My aunt nodded her head sadly. "Poor Yuki." A few days after that, Yuki died. My aunt was trying to change Yuki's behavior at night. She forced the little girl to sleep in her own bedroom, even though Yuki screamed and cried. My aunt left her there, alone, and looked at the door. In the morning, she found Yuki lying motionless in the bed. The poor little girl was dead. Nobody could understand what had happened. The coroner couldn't determine the cause of death. There wasn't a mark of her body. She was perfectly healthy. She had just mysteriously died during the night. There was no explanation. After the funeral, I went back to my aunt's house. Everyone was very sad. She returned the digital camera I had given to Yuki. I took it home with me. It was something to remember by her. The memory card was full of random photos that Yuki had taken. I browsed through them, weeping fear from my eye. There were pictures of my apartment, picture of my aunt's house, picture of flowers, dogs, toys, candy, etc. Silly picture that a child would take. Then I came to the last picture and it made my blood run cold. My hand went trembling. I wanted to scream, but nothing would come out. The timestamp on the photo showed that it had been taken on the night Yuki died. Here's the last picture that poor little girl ever took with my digital camera. Hey guys, before you keep watching the video, if you want to send a personal true horror story of yours, please send it to me on my email and I will contact you for sure. And keep watching your video. When I was a young boy, I lived in a small town. Johnny Gray lived across the street from me. I was friends with his big brother. He was just a baby then. I saw him growing up, but I never paid much attention to him. Sometimes in the evening, my mother would send me out to the local store to buy a carton of milk or a bag of sugar. On the way to the shop, I had to pass along dark stretch of road. During the day it was just a shady place lined with gnarled trees and vacant plots where nothing had been built and nothing was ever going to be built. I was never afraid of it by day, but at night it was a different place. A lonesome place, a place of darkness and strongness, a place of terror and fear. There were no houses nearby, no street lights. It was pitch black as black it could be, dark as the deepest night. The tall trees blocked out the moon and the stars casting their long shadows across the road. Whenever you had to go that way, you walked slower and slower. It was like stepping into a dark tunnel. Behind you were the lights of the houses, the sound of the cars and people walking along the sidewalk. Ahead of you there was just a long lonely stretch of darkness in which anything could be lurking, anything at all. Every time I had to pass that place at night, I would read it. I kept hoping somebody would come along so I wouldn't have to walk alone, but nobody ever came. As I walked along that dark stretch road, I would keep my eyes fixed on the trees, half expecting to see something or someone lurking there in the darkness. Perhaps it was the bogeyman. My mother had often told me about the bogeyman and how he waited in the dark place for boys and girls who strayed from the path. Perhaps it was a child predator. My mother had also warned me about evil men who tried to lure children with the promise of candy and puppy dogs. Perhaps it was something else, something worse. Out of the corner of my eye, I would catch glimpses of misshapen figures crouching there in the pitch black, waiting for the moment when they would burst forth and pounce on me. Then, in that silent and isolated area, they would begin tearing me and rending me and doing unspeakable things to me, and nobody would ever see me again. I'm not sure what I expected to see lurking in that lonely place at night. My imagination always got the better of me. In my mind, it was a hideous creature somewhere between animal and man. It had long spindly limbs and huge sharpened claws. It had wet slimy skin and eyes that burned like fire. I imagined it hiding in the branches of those old trees, dropping down without a sound and stalking the unwary boys and girls who passed along the dark and lonely road at night. One night I almost got me. I was walking down the lonely road and all of a sudden there wasn't any light up ahead. That's when I knew it was coming. I could just feel it waiting there in the darkness. I started running, desperate to get away, but I could feel it behind me. It was ganging on me. I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. I ran as fast as I could. I ran until I thought my heart would burst. It almost had me in clutches, but I managed to get away. When I got back to the safety of my house, I looked at myself in the mirror and there was a long jagged rip in my back of my shirt, as if sharp claws had tried to grab me and just missed me by an inch. That scared me real bad, and afterwards I hated going down that lonely road more than ever. Some night I won't come back. I warned my mother. She just laughed and told me not to be silly. There is something out there in the dark, I told her. There is nothing there in the dark that isn't there in the light, she assured me. What do adults know about the world? Grown ups think like they know everything. They place their trust in what they read, but they only read what is reported in the newspaper and on TV. They drive around in their cars and never have to walk anywhere at night. They don't know what goes on out there in the dark, in wretched lonely places where no light ever shines and the darkness hangs like a cloud on the ground and no bird ever sings. I know they wouldn't believe me. I knew there was nothing I could say to convince them that something or someone lived down there among the trees on that dark and lonely stretch road. As I grew older, I gradually forgot about the lonely road. I got taller, I went to high school, I started playing football, I learned to drive and started dating girls, of course. The years passed by and somehow I forgot about the thing that occurred there in the darkness. The memory of it still remained as a distant corner of my mind, but it was a memory locked away in childhood. The years passed by, but I never thought about the other kids who had to walk down the dark, lonely road at night. 3 days ago, Johnny Grade went missing. He lived across the street from me. I was friends of his big brother. He was just a baby then. I saw him growing up, but I never paid much attention to him. No, until he went missing. They found him in the trees of that dark, lonely road. His body was torn and ripped and crushed, almost beyond recognition. The police said he had been mauled by some kind of animal. The moment I heard about it, knew what's happening. John Gray had been murdered by the thing my childhood fears had created. The thing I had conjured up in my imagination. I had left it on that dark, lonely road. I had left it there to wait for some scared little boy who happened to be walking home on a dark night. A little boy who couldn't run as fast as I could run. After that, the town cut down the trees and put up street lights. That stretch of the road isn't dark and lonely anymore. The thing that lurked there is gone now. It's gone somewhere else, where people are unexpecting to some other small towns. Small town like yours, where it will wait again, just as I did here. It will wait for some other frightened little boys or girls to come along. It's only a matter of time. It was the middle of the night and I was in the bedroom trying to relax. I changed the channel on the TV and saw that the local news was on. At the bottom of the screen there was a breaking news alert. Murder on the loose, hiding in the Venice city. Police warning everyone to be on the alert. Suspect is armed and dangerous. I was just drifting off to sleep when I was awakened by a strange noise downstairs. It sounded like there was someone in the house. At that moment, my heart began beating fast and broke into cold squeak, straining my ears to listen. I thought I heard another noise. It was the sound of the door creaking. It wasn't my imagination. There was an intruder in the house. I have to get out of there, fast as I could. I slipped off the bed as quickly as possible and crept toward the window. My body was shaking with fear, and I was hoping I didn't make any noise. Just then, I heard faint footsteps making their way up the stairs. It sounded like more than one person. At any second I would burst through the door. I had to get away. I climbed out the window and into the garbage roof, moving as fast as I could without making too much noise. At the edge of the roof, I grabbed the drain pin and lowered myself down until I dropped it into the garden. As I paused at the window I had just escaped from, I saw the lights goes on. That was close, I thought. A chill ran down my spine as I thought about what would have happened if they caught me. I made my way to the bottom of the garden and into the wood. Once I was safely hidden by the trees, I broke into a run. I pushed onward, stumbling through the darkness, moving through the undergrowth until I came to another house. Instead, clutching my knife, I headed towards another house.